It's time now for the latest business news with Charles Pellegrin, and we begin in Japan, where the government shared new growth figures.
That's right. The Japanese economy expanded by 1% in 2016. This is mostly thanks to a bump in exports as well as in capital investment, fueled by a low yen currency and government spending measures. But as Anka Ula explains, Japan is still struggling with an inflation problem.
A fourth straight quarter of growth for Japan. The world's third largest economy closed out the year with 1% annualized growth, thanks primarily to a weakened yen and strong exports. Q4 of 2016 saw Japan's exports grow 2.6%, with capital spending seeing a slight bump of 0.9%, reversing the decline of the previous quarter. It's good news for Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who can claim the success of his so-called Abenomics. His government announced an optimistic economic forecast.
Our view is that the economy will maintain a moderate growth phase while improvement in employment and income is unchanged.
But the economy's dependence on exports could mean choppy waters for Japan moving forward, making it especially vulnerable to trade barriers, particularly from the United States. Private spending, which accounts for more than half of Japan's GDP, declined amid a lack of significant wage growth, combined with limited buying power and more expensive imports. There is growing concern in Japan about the rise in U.S. protectionism under Donald Trump, despite an amicable meeting between the two heads of state over the weekend. The U.S. president has previously accused Japan of gaining an unfair advantage by weakening its currency as part of Abe's monetary stimulus package. Japan's persistent trade surplus with the U.S. has many worried it could be targeted by Trump in the future.
And Charles, any of this data having an effect on the markets?
Well, the Nikkei closed in positive territory at over 0.4%, investors reassured by the incidentless negotiations between Trump and Abe. Trends seen across all Asian markets, investors taking cues from U.S. investors who ended last week on a high. You can see the Shanghai Composite up by 0.5%, the Hang Seng in Hong Kong up 0.4%, the Kospi in South Korea up 0.1%. In Europe, markets opened higher as well, also buoyed by the good performance in the U.S. at the end of last week. FTSE in London up by 0.2%, the Paris CAC 40 up 0.3%, and the DAX in Frankfurt up 0.2%.
Now, in South Korea, Samsung's boss got called in for questioning over corruption claims.
Yeah, absolutely. Lee Jae-yong has been called in as a suspect for a second time by investigators in South Korea's biggest corruption scandal. Prosecutors will decide whether or not to issue an arrest warrant for the leader of the conglomerate. The firm is accused of seeking political favors by donating to charities run by a confidant of South Korean President Park Geun-hye. Well, the boss of Samsung had already been questioned in January, but the court ruled there weren't enough grounds for arrest. But investigators say there are now new aspects that require more questioning. 4 other Samsung executives have also been identified as suspects. Let's take a look at some of the other business stories making headlines this Monday. Toshiba is set to announce a write-down of close to $6 billion on Tuesday after cost overruns at its U.S. nuclear branch. Conglomerate had warned of this back in December, just a year after an accounting scandal that had cost over $1 billion. The write-down could wipe out the company's shareholder equity. And China's largest property developer, Dalian Wanda Group, is setting its sights on European banks in a bid to diversify from its core real estate business. One of the institutions eyed by Dalian Wanda could be Postbank, which has been put up for sale by Deutsche Bank. This would be Dalian Wanda's first move in the financial sector after a year of acquiring anything from U.S. cinemas and production studios to an Italian yacht maker. And Swiss voters have rejected a plan to reform the country's corporate tax system in a referendum over the weekend. The plan was supported by the business community as it was designed to prevent taxes rising sharply for foreign investors. The government now needs to find an alternative, which could include higher rates for multinational companies.
And Batman's always a hit at the box office, back in movie theaters once again, but it's not the Batman that we're probably used to.
No, this is Lego Batman, and he beat the competition at the box office this weekend, which included 50 Shades Darker and John Wick 2 with with Keanu Reeves, The movie included Robin, Superman, King Kong, villains from Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, and it made over $55 million on its debut in the US and Canada. It was the first time in 7 years that 3 movies opened to more than $30 million on the same weekend. So after the success of the first Lego movie, it looks like this franchise could be the building block of Time Warner's future.
So clever. Are you going to see it?
I hope so, yeah. I really loved the first one. It was amazing.
All right.